those had been part of the claims that had not been approved while I was on vacation. So, with that, I am going to reread my statement of disclosure and then just reaffirm our previous vote. So there is no conflict between my volunteer work for Broadwater County and citizens and my duty as a county commissioner. My involvement with my community is comparable to other county commissioners throughout Montana, including city council persons. I receive no personal monetary gain from working with Broadwater County Development Corporation, BCDC, Townsend Area Chamber of Commerce, Auxiliary, Rotary, Montana Board of Crime Control, Youth Justice Council, Area 4 Agency on Aging, County Board of Printing, or any other organization that offers services to the citizens of Broadwater County. I do not own a business or such property. I do not rent or lease any property or assets to any business. The best way to be an effective county commissioner is to be involved. Montana Association of Counties, MACO, has committees that support this work. Economic Development Committee, Health and Human Services Committee, among others. MCA 762527 and MCA 95112 support commissioners' involvement. My husband is Executive Director of Montana Business Assistance Connection, AMBAC. AMBAC is Broadwater County's Certified Regional Development Corp, CRDC, and our Federal Economic Development Agency, EDA, and has been since before 2004. In fact, Broadwater County has been involved with and complied with the Public Works and Economic Development Act of 1965. Broadwater County contributes an annual equivalent of 1 mil to receive services by both EDA and CRDC as is required for that assistance. That 1 mil equates to less than 3% of MBAC's operating budget. That 1 mil is not paid to Brian Obert. MBAC derives its funding from many sources including EDA, CRDC, interest-bearing revolving loan funds, grants, state contracts, and membership from local businesses and governments, city and county, including Lewis and Clark and Marr counties, Augusta, East Helena, Lincoln, Townsend, and White Sulphur Springs. But the benefits to Broadwater County are far more than that mill. There is no conflict of interest. And also I have a letter from the Attorney General, and it states, quote, if the Board of County Commissioners is considering annual membership dues and or funding for economic development within the annual budget as allowed by Federal Economic Development Agency and state certified regional development requirements, and or for a board where Ms. Obert is a voting member, Ms. Obert is not prohibited from voting on that specific measure after she has publicly disclosed the conflict of interest. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would move that we reaffirm our vote of 2 weeks ago to pay the MBAC and BCDC claims as they were presented.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, Obert always gives us big disclosure talk and everything else, and like I said before, it isn't worth the paper it's wrote on. And I want that on the record. It's about time it gets out there so people know what the hell's going on, to put it bluntly.
Is there a second to the motion to approve these claims then? I'll second for discussion. So in this Great West Engineering, is that the,
I was going to talk about that next.
okay,
It's a different process, so I thought it was appropriate to maybe divide the two
okay.
different
So
subjects.
we'll have a vote on the MBAC and the BCDC, right?
Correct.
Is there all in favor of the motion
Question.
to approve?
Can we have
Corey?
this discussion? Not sure whose phone that is.
I'd just like to make you buy donuts when that happens.
How's she gonna afford it if it happens 2 or 3 times a meeting all year? All down the record too.
So, we've been through this a lot. We've discussed it many times. I've provided written legal memos many times. As far as the vote on anything for funding with MBAC, if you disclose your what you've done, and you're asserting that there's no financial benefit to you because of that. That is a separate issue than BCDC. Okay, so I'm not gonna sit here and say that Commissioner Obert cannot vote on MBAC funding. I think that would take a lot of, it would take basically a fact trail that goes and shows that Broadwater County's money basically produces a financial benefit personally to Brian and Laura Obert. But that's not my advice that I've given, and that's not my advice I'm giving today. So I'm not telling you can't vote on MBAC after disclosing your interest, well, certainly your involvement through Brian. I think that's what the law requires, is a disclosure, and she's done that. That is a separate issue from the BCDC vote. The BCDC vote is specifically because Commissioner Obert is a member of the board of that organization, which at least she was. Are you still currently a member of the board?
Absolutely, yes.
So, any member of a board of directors of any organization, whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit, by law, you have a fiduciary duty to that organization to exercise your best business judgment, to avoid conflicts of interest, there's multiple duties described by law. So any person, any of those other members of the board, or any board of directors of some other organization, those officers and directors have a fiduciary duty to that organization. So when you act as a member of that board and you fulfill that fiduciary duty, you do so with that organization and its charters and its beneficiaries' best interests in mind. That's the right thing to do. The law specifically sees that there's a conflict potentially between a county officer who is doing their duty on behalf of the county, on behalf of the citizens who elected us to fulfill the laws, and the person who at the same time has a fiduciary duty and is acting in the best interest of an organization. And that's why the law specifically states in Title II, and I've given this memo to you repeatedly, specifically states that a county officer or any public officer who is an officer or director of an organization cannot participate in county or any official decisions or actions toward that organization so long as they're an officer or a director of that organization. So specifically with BCDC, Commissioner Obert is a member of the board of directors of that organization. She cannot vote on any county matters whatsoever related to BCDC so long as she is a member of the board of directors of BCDC. That is crystal clear, verbatim, what the statute says. I didn't make it up. And I've advised repeatedly that she cannot vote. Today she can vote on MBAC. She cannot vote on BCDC. That's item 1. I guess that's items 1 and 2. Item 3, though, is I'm not sure that factually where you are on the dues with MBAC and BCDC. If you recall, back in August, there was the budget resolution contemplated that a bunch of money from reimbursement from a turn lane project that predates me was going to be set aside and used for economic development, and I understood it was going to be specifically for these two organizations and possibly other uses. Commissioner Slivka asked that that matter be separated, and it was voted on separately from the rest of the budget resolution. At that time, I advised Commissioner Obert to recuse herself from that vote for the same reason that I'm doing so today, but for a further reason that the week before that, you commissioners passed a resolution saying you would conduct your meetings in various ways according to law, and that resolution specifically said that commissioners would recuse themselves from matters in which they have a conflict of interest as advised by the county attorney. So that's a second reason why today Commissioner Obert should not vote on BCDC, because she passed a resolution, voted for it herself, in which she said she would recuse herself from matters where the county attorney advised her she had a conflict of interest. And I'm advising her of that today, just as I've done at least 5 times in the past. So what happened on that day with that budget vote was that it was now 2 commissioners voting, and on a 1-1 tie, the motion to use that money from the turn lane to fund MBAC and BCDC failed. And so that, there was no decision made as to funding for economic development for MBAC or BCDC, and there was no decision made as to what to do with the money from the turn lane. The rest of the budget went forward and passed. So today, what's not clear to me, because Commissioner Obert said that we're repeating what we did previously, well, what you're repeating is a vote that you made 2 weeks ago when it wasn't on the agenda, and I advised you needed to redo it. Okay? So that's why we're here today. But it's not clear to me what the state of the budget is, whether you've made some other decision at some other time, specifically for funding for MBAC and BCDC. So I think it would make sense to answer that question. But again, I'm advising Commissioner Obert, for all the reasons that I've stated repeatedly, she should not and cannot legally vote for the BCDC funding. I don't know what letter she's referring to from the Attorney General's office. I don't care what letter they've sent. This is black letter law. If she wants to share more about that letter, I'd be happy to hear it.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'll go ahead and amend my budget, or my motion, to include just NBAC for now. I move that we go ahead and reaffirm our previous vote to initial the MBAC claim to move that through the process. And then we can address maybe some of the other issues.
Motion's been made to adjust the motion to pay only the MBAC claim. Is there a second? I'll second. Motion's been made and seconded to initial and pay the MBAC claim. All in favor?
I have a question
Aye.
though. I'm not clear on the status of the budget. The question I had about the August budget actions, et cetera, is the MBAC funding part of the budget resolution that's been passed? If not, I'm assuming you'd have to do a budget amendment.
I'd be happy to
Yeah.
address that if you'd like. So, August 27th, 2018, the minutes read, Commissioner Salifka moved to use money from the Wheatland Turn Lane Fund in Pilt to cover shortfalls in the budget. Motion seconded by Commissioner Dellinger for discussion and stated economic development has helped county taxpayers. Voting yes, Salifka. Voting no, Dellinger. Abstain, Obert. Motion failed. So, what's the status of the budget? The status of the budget is what was determined by this commission in both April and August, and that was to fund economic development, MBAC and BCDC, through the turn lanes in Pilt, because that was specifically derived from economic development benefits this county received. 27-ish thousand in interest and 150,000 we would have lost without the services of Mark Menke at MBAC. So what happened in August from Franklin was an attempt to change that decision already made. That is what failed. I think your recollection is that his vote was was different than it actually was. His vote failed, therefore changing economic development funding failed. Funding economic development from Pilt, specifically the Wheatland turn lanes, remained as status quo.
From what previous decision?
From two previous decisions. One is with the budget and 2 was specific to economic development.
His vote was to, or his motion, first motion was to sever that item from the rest of the budget and vote on it separately.
And it failed.
Then that means it's hanging out there in limbo and has not passed.
Status, whenever a motion fails,
No.
status quo, well, we can maybe pull up the videos and watch what happened, but trying to derail this county right now of economic development would be disastrous. We have a golden opportunity right now with this TED that we're working on. We've got growth coming to this county and we need some help with it. We're gonna have 200 families moving into Tintina probably, starting in June. We're gonna have to have some help or we are going to get bulldozed over by it. I'm not sure why there's such a focus against our businesses in this county, but it's hurting families, it's hurting our schools, and it's hurting our businesses. So, yeah, I'll fight for economic development, because I think it's one of I know it's one of the cornerstones of an economic, or a county commissioner's job. Public safety, public health, and prosperity, that's economic development. So, there's other things we can do, to address some of these issues, but, derailing economic development would be absolutely devastatingly harmful to Broadwater County.
I'm not intending to derail anything. I'm intending that, and advising you to do the process correctly. That's what I'm advising. And the effect of a motion to sever one item from the budget and vote on it separately, and then it fails, that means the rest of the budget went through, and that little sheep that got cut from the herd is hanging out there by
It didn't
itself.
get cut, Corey. The motion failed. It didn't get cut.
It failed to pass, the funding failed to pass
No, it
on a
didn't.
1-1 vote.
No, Corey, exactly the opposite. Franklin tried to stop the funding for economic development.
No.
That's what failed. Yes, it's right here in the minutes. That is what failed, Corey.
Perhaps you've recrafted the minutes. All I can say is this.
You know
It
what,
was
that is
severed.
an accusation that is absolutely unfounded and false and beneath your
I'll
station.
be happy to watch the video. The effect of a motion from Robert's Rules of Order to sever one item from a group upon which you could have had 50 individual votes that day if you preferred to do that. That item was severed from the group. The motion was to fund the economic development, whatever there was gonna be in that bucket, from the turn lane funds. That motion
No, it
failed
wasn't,
on a
Cory.
1-1 vote.
No, it didn't.
That motion failed on a 1-1 vote.
Maybe
That
I'm gonna read this
funding
again.
never passed.
These are the official minutes approved of that meeting. Commissioner Salifka moved to use money from the Wheatland Turn Lane Fund in PILT to cover shortfalls in the budget. Motion seconded by Commissioner Delger for discussion and stated economic development has helped county taxpayers. Voting yes was Salifka, voting no was Delger. I abstained, motion failed. That was not a motion to fund economic development, it was a motion to not.
But the
Fund
funding,
economic
the
development.
question of that turn lane funding was severed from the budget. It never passed either way. It didn't pass in the way that Commissioner Slifka wanted to do it, and it didn't pass in the way that Commissioner Delger wanted to do it. It is literally hanging out there with no action having been taken on it yet.
It had already been approved to be funded prior to Franklin's motion to not fund it.
How it had been privately, that was your day to approve the budget. Nothing had been approved prior to that day that would matter. It was a prelim.
Through our budget process, we'd already discussed taking the money from the turn lane and putting that into MBAC and BCDC, taking those mills and putting them back into the general fund.
Right.
That was what we did. We never changed that discussion or that decision to do that. He made the motion to change that decision. We never changed the decision.
But there, until that final budget resolution decision, there is no decision. All those preliminary preparatory discussions are building the package. That's the purpose of that final decision and that vote, is to approve the budget. His motion to sever, or his request and motion to sever that means whatever else happened with the budget, that item was not acted upon. It's hanging out there unacted upon.
We actually don't have to have PILT decisions be a part of that approved budget. So just like the lift for the ambulance that we're considering giving to the ambulance crew, that doesn't have to result in a budget amendment. So it's not actually a part of the budget. So this would be separate. It could be taken out. It wasn't, but it could be taken out and still approved as just a PILT expenditure. And that was done early on.
So you still have to make a decision as to what to do with the turn lane money. Is that accurate?
No, I don't believe it is, no.
Is it,
But it could be a separate discussion.
but is that money in the general fund or some special?
No, it's in PILT.
It got reimbursed from, that wasn't a PILT. It may have been a
Yes, it
PILT
was.
expenditure, but the reimbursement you had to pay back into PILT?
Mhm.
No, I don't think so, there's. No.
This vote is just to initial those claims.
So we have voted to pay the MBAC claim, right?
We did, just haven't gavelled the vote. We voted aye, but Corey, I think, wanted to have discussion, so I don't know if you wanna make that stand or ask for another aye vote, so that there's clear that we had discussion.
If you're gonna proceed, I recommend you make a motion to amend the budget to pay, however you're gonna pay MBAC, so that it is actually a motion to amend the budget. And I believe that you need to do that. I think it's still sitting out there. You can clearly do it, and I'm not telling Commissioner Roberts she can't vote on the MBAC funding. What I'm saying is, my understanding of the effect of that motion was that it was not passed with the budget and is hanging out there. I would say just make it cleaner, make a motion to amend the budget accordingly. You can do a resolution and sign it later for the MBAC funding. Because I do not believe it was passed with the budget.
I would encourage you maybe to contact, here's what I would suggest, let's go ahead and proceed. If you would like to, at the training next week, maybe the three of us can sit down with somebody who's an expert on county budgeting and get this resolved through someone at MACO, bring that information back and share it with the public. To amend the budget is a lengthy process, it's done 2 or 3 times a year. And again, if our giving PILT to the ambulance crew is going to require a budget amendment, which it does not, then the same argument can be made for this
You're
particular
just twisting everything
expenditure.
around and around and around.
No, you're just confused, Franklin.
I am more than you, for sure.
So we still need to make a decision on BCDC.
We do, we do. Corey is wrong, but I am willing to just drop it for now. Again, let's have a discussion with MACO at the training, get it from an expert, and also I'll work with Mackenzie McCarthy, who's chief legal counsel there, on a resolution on that issue. So I'll postpone it for now until the
Okay.
beginning of the new year, when we have a new team.
So now the Great West issue, Great West Engineering.
So the Great West engineering issue, this is the same thing, only a little bit different. So the excuse me?
I said quite a bit different.
The BOR land acquisition project was started about 3 years ago. It's a 2.5-year process. This was started by the trust board, and it is their process, their project. The National Park Service, NPS, took over negotiations for the federal lands for BOR. So that's who we worked with. In the process, so we signed an agreement that we would support the process at the very beginning. One of the things done at the very beginning was a request of the grant writer, who actually took Broadwater County through the process, that that person would rewrite the lease agreements for the Rod and Gun Club, softball field, and golf course, because at the time they couldn't be found. and those were housed with the city, it was a city lease. That person was not an attorney. So through the process, at the very end of it, which is either last May or last August, I believe we signed with the National Park Service in May, but we received the final letter in August. So we do have our grant writer who is researching which of those dates is the official date. But at that time, we signed another contract, so that was the second time, in which we again said that we would follow 11 steps. One of those 11 steps was to update the agreements for those sport clubs, Rod and Gun Club, golf course, and softball fields, because now it was going to be a lease, not with the city working with BOR, but with the counties working with the city. So, through the trust board and the recreation club, Great West Engineering was hired, and one of the things they were hired to do was, among those 11 steps, was also to update those leases. We have an email from Chief Legal Counsel at Mako that states that it is not practicing law just to draft a lease. We had a request that an engineer draft a construction contract for search and rescue, and that also was not practicing law. So the accusation that Great West Engineering, that their planner and engineer was somehow practicing law, is not accurate. Those were sent first thing to the county attorney for approval. And they also had the grant writer who had offered some edits. So just to pick out Great West is inaccurate. So with that said, I will move that we reaffirm our vote of a couple weeks ago to initial the claim to get Great West Engineering paid for the work they have done for Broadwater County thus far under the third approval of their contract with us that was done this summer.
Is there a second?
Great Western ended up with a contract, signed contract, that actually wasn't there, money-wise. How this come about, and I'll tell you how it was, if you understand. Ober come in at the last minute thing, had this contract to sign for Great Western that the trust board wanted. That was no problem with me. I mean, the trust board, they've been handling all this. I second the motion. Commissioner Chairman Delger signed the contract. Then the trust board gets hold of me and say, hey, we never initiated this. We have nothing to do with that. We never discussed it. They were against it. Not that they were against it. They were against the idea that it was brought out that they had approved this thing. So, like the one trust board, I believe it was the trust board member said, got a contract with Great Western, no way to fund it. In other words, Commissioner Obert lied to us on that the trust board wanted it. And that's what's perturbed me.
None of that's true, and we did have a follow-up and final and fourth vote to approve the contract with the trust board 2 weeks ago. And that's in the minutes.
What is that again?
2 weeks ago, we had another vote for that contract to approve it at the request of the trust board.
But the trust board wasn't involved, to start off with.
It was their project, Franklin.
I know you can work and work and work to cover up your lie, that's what you've been doing. Other than that, that's, as long as the people know what it is.
And the trust board came back and said that they were, and we signed a transfer of $20,000 from the trust board to the rec board
Right.
to go for this project.
No, well, yeah, but it was for the, or the golf, what was it for the golf course?
No, we had.
More and stuff.
No, we had a trust, we had a grant approval to the golf course for mowers. We had a grant approval for the Rod and Gun Club. Those
Right.
were the two grant approvals we had. We also had a letter from the trust board to transfer $20,000 to the Parks and Recreation to handle, to do the groundwork, to take care of the transfer of this contract, because the trust board doesn't wanna handle the 11 steps it takes to transfer the ground.
But that
We
was,
also took the money out of the Parks and Recreation boards to pay the contract.
yeah, it had to be paid, I mean, the work had already, a certain amount, I think it was $4,000, it had to be paid, there's no doubt about that.
Yes, Tim?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just a comment here. We've been following these issues with the county here for, I'm gonna say several months as late. And one of the problems, and I brought that up at the public comment period this morning, is the agendas being revised. And for example, a couple of weeks ago, we had a meeting in the afternoon that really didn't give the constitutional right of the people the right to know and the right to participate, because it came in at an 11th hour. So here I am again, asking you, Mr. Chairman, at what point in time does this agenda get revised, and how do we keep the people informed as their constitutional right, and these decisions that are being made outside of that context of legal agendas and meeting process? Hopefully can move forward and get this resolved so we don't keep going through this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And these revised agendas are normally, we put them out by Thursday afternoon and we post them.
Mr. Chairman, just a follow-up. I've seen over the last multiple months where these agendas have been revised a couple of times, sometimes even more, between Monday's meeting and Friday. In fact, some of them even been, who knows? So, again, without having a date on here of when this was revised, the public don't really know to be involved. So it makes it very difficult to keep the people informed, and that's my push, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully not to derail anything, just to keep the people informed ahead of the decision process rather than behind it. And again, here we are with a decision, trying to get the cart behind the horse again instead of in front of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So we've already made the decision to pay the Great West Engineering claims, have we not?
We were asked to not follow through on that, and, I am reaffirming our motion of 2 weeks ago, so that nobody can say it wasn't agended, nobody can derail, our land acquisition project. We have 2 more that are in process, and if we can't get this first one done, we're gonna lose the other 2. One is for search and rescue, to have, land at the northern end of the county or the, Silos area for a search and rescue site there at the lake. And the other one is to improve and expand the Rod and Gun Club at Indian Creek. If we can't get the first one done, National Park Service is not gonna work with us for the next 2. And I do not want to see that, just because there's an effort to derail Broadwater County again. So that's why I made the motion, put it on the agenda. It's,
There hasn't
it's
been any
just
motion
crossing
derail
T's
anything,
and
it's just
I's.
the procedure that's been carried on.
So there's a motion to reaffirm our commitment to pay the Great West Engineering claim. Any more discussion?
I would just, so I'm glad you're doing this on the agenda. That was my concern, was that it was done previously not being on the agenda, so I think that's great. My only concern was paying the portion of that bill associated with drafting those contracts. It was an engineer that drafted the contracts, and it was an engineer drafting agreements for 2 different entities. And by law, that those entities, and certainly one of them being the county, by law has to be represented by an attorney. And that is putting them at risk. It's practicing law without a license when you're paying an engineer to draft contracts for third parties. That is lawyer work. And I also, Commissioner Overt, going to get legal counsel from other lawyers because she doesn't like the legal counsel that I'm giving to her. Well, I'm the elected county attorney for this county, and I'm not trying to derail anything. I'm thrilled this project's going forward. I'm simply trying to ask you to follow the correct procedure, and in this case, I don't even know what it is, $100 or whatever the amount is. Prudence for both you as well as the recipient of those funds dictates that you don't pay them to do lawyer work when they're not lawyers.
So Corey, were you given these drafts to approve?
I was given the drafts, and I asked at that time, I said, I need to sit down with whoever's actually in charge of this project because some of the details for the agreement are necessary in order to ensure the contracts line up with them. And I was given a name. I didn't know who this person was or that they were an engineer at the time. I mean, in other words, I was given a name, but this person didn't mean anything to me. I'd never met him before or anything. And so then since that time, from the last, whenever it was, a couple meetings ago, when you had all the folks here, Steve McCullough and all those folks, I understood coming out of that meeting that they were moving forward on the project and they were gonna have Peter Simon work on revising these contracts. There are some old agreements that I revised, the city leases, which you're referring to, that were from 2015, 2016. Those were leases that were necessary to get everybody current in order to get the transfer of the land. So we did those in either 2015 or 2016. And that was what, at the time, I had, in the summer, I'd asked for those old agreements because we were simply gonna basically modernize those, and this whole thing could have been a lot simpler. And it's, nobody can locate those files. So they're either in the city, we thought Mia Whitfield had them, I think she's moved away or something. So basically, we went through this process in July, searching, trying to find files. This thing came to me in August, and that's when I was asking for the ability to sit down with whoever was forming these agreements, because there were details in those contracts that I wasn't privy to. So again, the whole issue of a non-lawyer doing it, I wasn't even aware of that being an issue until we actually had that meeting here when everybody was here. So is it accurate that the trust board is proceeding with all the steps to move forward on this? Is that still the case?
The trust board has authorized a grant to empower the recreation board
Okay.
to move forward. The rec board is working with Peter Simon with, I understand they got the drafts from you that were drafted, and working with him to put together the legal.
The
T's and
latest
I
ones or the
process.
previous ones from the city from 3 years ago?
The latest ones.
Okay.
We still need to pay for the work done, and perhaps follow through on the rest of that. But again, we have a precedent of others drafting contracts, drafting those leases. Those were first drafted by the grant writer. So there's no reason we have to stand on that we don't pay for the services provided by Great West Engineering at this point.
So the contracts granted that were from 3 years ago, we took a very, very old contract that had been expired. I instructed Mia on some edits to make in that. We didn't have an electronic version, we had a hard copy. So basically she had to retype everything. And then I gave her a red line of changes to make in the typing, and then she sent it back to me when it was done. And if we had any more edits, they were very minor. So that's not practicing law, that's me directing a typist of how to change some things. So, I mean, this thing's a minor point. The point is, it doesn't make sense to do what we know is obviously wrong, and it's gonna be a small portion of their bill. And frankly, engineers don't wanna be in the middle of this and have their engineering board looking at them saying, why are you doing lawyer work? whatever you're gonna do, I recommend we move on today so we can all get going on the next phase of this thing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Great West did that work in good faith. They deserve to be paid.
Yeah, but if I operate on somebody in good faith, I'm not a doctor, I shouldn't get paid for it. Especially because I
Did-
probably wouldn't be worth much.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask him a question?
Sure.
Do you know personally that everything they did was just the work on this contract? I don't know what they did.
I don't know what they did, there's an itemized thing in there though.
See, and I have emails between you and Jeremy Fadness, where Jeremy Fadness is working on the contract with search and rescue. So how is this not the same deal?
So.
He's just writing a draft of a contract, and
Well-
that's exactly what Jeremy did.
And so there's a good point. So way back when I started, Jeremy was working on a deal, and I asked him, and he said their engineering firm retains an attorney who basically gives them guidance on and supervises their drafting of contracts. And then when I'm working on Jeremy, I've worked on a couple different things with Jeremy, and if I'm telling him change X or Y, it's basically what happens. I mean, that's what, a lot of real estate firms do that. They have an attorney that's retained, and the attorney advises them to where that's what's going on. So, like I said, what I'm focused on here is, if this guy's being a lawyer, don't put him in trouble by paying him to be a lawyer. If he's got if their firm has retained a lawyer and that lawyer is telling them what to do, then fine, but that's not the information that I was given. I mean, we've already belabored this thing more than it needs to be belabored, but
Amen.
I would recommend that we move. In everything that we're doing,
Anything we did was to hire Jerry to be an attorney. So I agree with Corey, let's go ahead and get this off the table and take care of our business.
I'll just say, in all these things, I'm not trying to vote one way or the other. This project, we all know we wanna go forward. I'm asking that we follow the correct legal process in each thing that we do. That's simply what I'm trying to do.
Okay. Is there a second to reaffirm our payment of that claim? I will second. All in favor of paying said claim to Great Western Engineering? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion
The
carries.
reason being, it was an illegal one to start off with, and I want that on the record.
And you're 100% wrong. As far as BCDC goes, I'll revisit that again in the future. There's my disclosure and the quote from the Attorney General. And here's those permits. And as far as the language you're reciting or quoting from a resolution, I'd like to see that, Corey. I don't have any record of such a resolution.
You don't have, of the resolution that you passed? It's a resolution that you passed the week after you met with Jim Nice, and you went through some training,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a resolution as to the conduct of your proceedings.
Yep, it's not a resolution. It's not required to be.
What is it?
It is, by law, we're required to have an open meeting policy,
Okay?
but I don't see it on here. So if it's on here and I just don't see it, I'd like you to point it out to me.
Is that the document there?
Mhm.
So this isn't the only document. You had a 4 or
It's 2
5 page.
pages.
Huh?
It's 2 pages.
No, you had a 4 or 5 page document that you adopted. What's the date on this one? August 20th?
No, if you could get that to me, I'd appreciate it.
I mean, I got it from you, so I'll go find it.
So we will,
I have 2 one real quick thing. Did you have any edits, and how do you feel about sending this to the MDT? Sent you a copy, I don't remember what day. I sent the 2017 letter first.
And I did, I didn't have any, I don't remember, I didn't hear about this school bus incident at all, so I had not heard of that.
Okay, Wynn had mentioned that, but I didn't recall any details.
Okay.
It was kind of a loud decibel level that day. Maybe I'll take that out since we don't have the details. Is Brandon, are you still here? As I look at you. Was there an accident with a school bus on this highway maybe a month or so ago, 2 weeks or so ago, that you're aware of?
I don't recall one.
Okay.
We-
I thought Wynn had said there was an accident with a bus where somebody had hit 3 kids, thank God nobody died.
Oh,
Do you know?
Holy cow,
That was not fun.
on our county.
Okay, you don't know about it either. Okay, then I think we should take that sentence out.
Okay.
I think you might have been maybe referring, is that what is that letter for? Maybe I could,
It's a letter to MDT to encourage the 4 lanes from Townsend North. Instead of, what they're planning on right now is the blinking light to East Helena. And I would argue with what's going on here, that we need from Townsend to the 4 lanes at Silos.
yeah, I would argue that it'd all get done, but.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, we've had we could go back through the history, we have a bunch of bad passes on buses, you know, with the stop sign out and, you know, I mean, this is in the news right now, what's going around the nation. I think he maybe was referring to the 3 that were hit in, I think it was down south or somewhere.
Okay,
In the southern state, but, you know, there's one in Missoula, a car hit a child crossing the road to the bus. I think maybe he was pointing out the fact that we support that to avoid any incidents here, so.
would you compile what you can find for Highway 287, so we can maybe attach that with a letter?
Yeah, and I
Okay.
would, how soon is that, our SWIFT system is down, and that's got a, I know back when I was on patrol, we had a whole bunch of them. And I know as they put in more 4 lanes and passing lanes, it made it better in most spots, but
Right?
it's definitely scary. Anybody stopping on the highway, in the middle of the highway is scary. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I would say just as soon as you can get it, it'd be great.
Okay,
Okay, thanks. Well, if it's good with you, I would move that we send the letter, take out the school bus, and make an attachment of Brandon's information and send it at that time?
Okay.
Does that
Is there
work?
a second?
I'll agree to that. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to send letter with some edits included to the Montana Department of Transportation concerning 4-lane construction of Highway 287 north of Townsend. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same.
Again, this isn't on the agenda.
No, this is what's called, Cheryl, a ministerial act, and that is management correspondence, that kind of thing. This is public safety, it's part of our charge. So we are allowed, and it's on the consent agenda, to actually send correspondence. This is
Mr.
not
Chairman.
committing the county to any money, it's just trying to keep our people safe, which is a good idea.
Mr.
And we don't need to sign it yet, since I'm
No,
gonna be
because
editing it.
that isn't out of there.
Okay.
I'll give you a copy for the record.
Tim? Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question concerning highway safety, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a county policy on controlled access, or does every home that's built along the highway have their own access? There's getting to be a real issue going east of town. And I was curious if there's a county policy that you can't have access, maybe every quarter mile, every half mile, or can it be every 300 feet?
I would think that that's probably lies with the state highway department.
It's access off private property, so where do we go and who do we ask, and can we maybe
You have to go
curtail
to the, I
some
think
of
that
it?
you have to go down here to the highway shop and they have an application for an access, I believe. I know
So
my
is
brother-in-law was
everyone
when my brother-in-law was the head, he had to submit those and the highway department had to approve them.
So does
for
every
access onto
property
the
owner
highway.
have to do that?
What's that?
So does every property owner have the right to access?
It's pretty much up to the highway department, I
Yeah,
believe.
It's highway department, okay.
I
Thank
know
you.
it's definitely with them.
It's getting a little out of control.
So, anything else to come?
No, that's enough.
So something that will be on your agenda sometime in the next, I'm not sure, month maybe, I approved the agreement between the county and MDT for the Toston Bridge project.
Okay.
So that's going through their levels, and then they're gonna contact you for agenda for your review of it. The only two things on it that I made a point of saying, make sure we bring this up in the meeting, one was an insurance coverage amount that the county has to maintain for its role in the project, and naming them as an additional insured. I wasn't sure if you guys were aware of that, so I made a point of telling them that needs to be highlighted in the meeting. And then the second thing is there's that pedestrian path under the old bridge, and once it's constructed, and then it's in the agreement, it's county's responsibility to continue to maintain it. I wasn't sure if that was part of your deal or not, but they'll construct it, but then you basically turn it over to the county. Is that in line with what you recall agreeing to?
Basically it was, yeah. Really the only maintenance was like in the winter if it's snowing.
Yeah, it's not
I think-
like rebuild, but if it's like snow,
Yeah,
if it's cracks that we need to tar, stuff like that.
oh, there wouldn't be any, what'd you say about a car?
Tar, like tarring a crack.
Oh, tarring.
Whatever the real word is,
Oh, okay.
filling in the cracks. But you should be getting notified by them fairly soon.
Okay. Anything else?
Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, just a real quick question. I fully understand that the next thing on your agenda for today is closed door with a legal summary regarding the Teamsters Union, and that is, a strategy process that is authorized for you folks to do that. The next one, I'm just a little maybe confused. We got a personnel issue, which gives the closed door meeting position, but we're talking about the constitutional rights of the people, the right to know and the right to participate. And again, the agenda is really pretty vague in being able to understand what's going on. I would hope that we could maybe protect the privacy of individuals that are being talked about. And if we're talking about legal strategy, I would hope that the people are advised that either A, our county attorney is gonna be part of this meeting, and or legal counsel, because I think you're probably like me, I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on TV. So I would like to be able to just make sure we address that the best we can. Thank you.
So Corey, you are part of that closed door, are you not?
Not
No.
the first one. So the first one, I've recused myself from that matter. Okay, so the county has some outside legal counsel. Second one, I'm not actually privy to what it is, but generally, that is where the courts have said, if it's an individual's privacy right, then maybe it's, who knows what it could be something that's affecting their individual rights as an employee, a person, et cetera, that they do have the right to have the meeting closed. They can, if they wish, advise that they waive that right and have it open, but ordinarily people don't do that. But as far as the giving notice to the public, what the Supreme Court has said is, you can't just say closed door meeting and that's it. You have to say, to the extent you can without violating someone's rights, the subject of the meeting. That's why this one, the first one you'll notice, it says specifically what the litigation issue is and the reason for the closure. So that's what the court has asked entities to do to advise the public. And then the second one, the only way to give you more information on that one would be to give a person's name and the reason for it, and you don't wanna do that, so.
Just trying to get as much clarification as we can, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. County Attorney.
Okay, so we will adjourn to a closed door then.
Tonight's meeting is here, same room?
Yeah.
Need me for the personnel one or not?